Hello YouTube, it's Monday the 19th of May 2008 and amateur radio has been back in the news again. Well hello, exactly 1 week ago a major earthquake struck of course the southwest of China and amateur radio was involved in the rescue effort. Many of you may have seen a news release that came from Hu Bravo Golf 8 Alpha Alpha Sierra, reporting that amateur radio was in use from the very first moments after the earthquake struck to help in the rescue attempts. He reported on Monday evening last week that over 200 local radio hams were using a UHF repeater in the Chengdu town, which had survived the quake, to direct social vehicles to transport the wounded. It's great that amateur radio was helping and that the local radio ham community were helping out from the first moments after the quake. Of course they did ask at the time that the frequencies of 7050, 7060 and 14270 were kept clear by the amateur community internationally to allow the communications, which I'm sure we can imagine must have been very difficult to take place. Well, this gives me the opportunity to discuss in this vlog about amateur radio's role in disaster relief. And some of you may have seen a blog entry by WA4D, Michael, who believes that, quote, ham radio's role as a public service is fast fading into irrelevance. Well, I have to say I disagree with Michael on this fact. He does point out that services such as Twitter and Fanfu, microblogging sites, were being used to disseminate the information immediately after the quake, and that's basically his justification for saying that ham radio's communication role is fading into irrelevance. But I can't help wondering how many of those Twitter messages were I'm OK messages. Having the general public sending in I'm OK messages in a completely decentralised way immediately after a major incident is not going to be very helpful, because the relief workers are going to be more interested in the people who aren't messaging. So there's issues surrounding that. Michael criticises amateur radio because it's a centralised network. I think that's really important actually during a major incident. The last thing you need is messages coming in from everywhere that you can't really sort out, or you need lots of people to try and sort out the really important ones from the more mundane ones. And if you've got amateur radio trained operators on the ground who are used to emergency communications, that should help to avoid the problems of sorting out these messages. Of course, the other thing is that mobile networks do quickly fail in any major incident, or even when they're being used more than their design capacity. Anyone, I'm sure, in the Western world who's attempted to send a Happy New Year text message on the 1st of January at midnight has witnessed this. Messages just don't get through because the networks collapse very quickly once they get beyond their design capacity. And of course the GSM system, which is used for as a mobile phone standard in most of the world, has what it calls the Access Overload Control System, known by the rather cumbersome abbreviation ACCOLC, which is actually designed to cut the general public off from mobile communications in the event of an incident to try and prioritise emergency messages. And if anyone's interested in the issues surrounding that, then I strongly recommend reading pages 42 to 47 of the London Assembly's report into the bombings in London on July the 7th, 2005, where they discuss how ACCOLC was used in the Aldgate area on the O2 network to prioritise police messages. And of course one of the greatest contributions of amateur radio to disaster relief came immediately following the Asian tsunami of 2004. One of the greatest contributions was made by Bharti, VU2RBI. This photograph shows me meeting her about 6 months after the Asian tsunami, Yes, I had a lot shorter hair then. But what happened in her case is that the Andaman Islands, the Andaman Nicobar Islands, are in the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles away from India, and they count in amateur radio terms as a separate country and as a separate island. They count for both the XCC and IOTA awards. But for several decades the Indian government had stopped amateurs from going to the islands. And by chance, in December 2004, Bharti was able to lead a group there for amateur radio purposes to let people around the globe contact this country, this DXCC entity of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. On Boxing Day 2004, after they'd been there about 3 weeks, of course the tsunami struck, and amateur radio, these operators suddenly found themselves the only option, the only way of communicating between the Andaman Islands and the outside world, as all of the rest of the telecoms infrastructure was knocked out in the events. Now, of course, the result of that was that Bharti and her team were able to go back a few months later. Amateur radio is now viewed a lot more importantly by the Indian government. I put a link in the description box as well to a video by CNN which documents some of Bharti's work in the aftermath of the Boxing Day 2004 tsunami. So whilst I think that WA4D has a point in as much as amateur radio needs to be aware of more modern technologies, the way that the general public have access to communication in emergencies now, the fact that we are centralised, the fact that we have equipment that relies on no infrastructure, unlike most mobile communication systems, does mean that we still have a really vital role to play, particularly I suspect in the developing world, where the telephone companies and the operators haven't necessarily spent so much money on making sure their networks are resilient. Radio amateurs are often used to operating in very difficult circumstances using portable equipment, as I say, from very remote areas. Indeed, that's at the heart of a lot of what we do. De-expeditioning, when we go to strange little islands with very small amounts of equipment to make contacts, whether we're contesters, exchanging information very, very quickly, but always with an eye to accuracy. This really is at the heart of what amateur radio operators train ourselves day in, day out to be doing. And it's really a shame in that regard that Mike K9AJ didn't manage to get to Rockall during last week, something that a lot of the amateur community had been looking for. Of course, until very recently, Rockall was the most rare island for islands on the air in Europe. Indeed, until very recently, it was completely unnumbered. It had never been operated before, and this is of course because it's just outside of helicopter operating range. It's about 200 miles off the coast of Scotland, making it very difficult to get to. And it's a pinnacle. It's about 25 metres high, with hardly any space on top, again about 25 metres in diameter. So it's a very difficult location to try and put a radio onto. And it's a shame that unfortunately the swell was too great, between 15 and 20 foot according to the press release, and therefore stopped Mike from getting onto that island, and we look forward to hopefully another operation from there soon. Well, that's about it from me for this week. I need to say thank you quickly to Fabian, DJ1YFK, for his excellent work in getting the Worldwide Young Contesters website at wwyc.net back into some working order. So if you haven't checked out the wwyc.net website recently, then please go and have a look at that. Also need to thank my new subscribers, and if you have any comments on anything that I've said or any of the points that have been raised, please do put a video comment or text comment below. If you aren't a user of YouTube, then feel free to email me, m0blf@m0blf.org.uk, and I'll put the comments in for you if that's what you'd like me to do. Well, that's it. Thanks very much. I'm Dominic, M0blf, and I'll see you next week, 7-3.